Hey guys, this is AI Gaming 1776, and we're going to try to play Far Cry 3 with the GTX 1060. I say try because the recording process has been pretty strange. I normally, to do screen capture, I normally use an Elgato, and that works just fine for 1080p. And then if I need to do 1440p or 4K, I can use NVIDIA's DSR. And that has worked fine for a long time. But for some reason, the Elgato plus DSR has just been awful lately. And I don't know if it's just if DSR is awful. If you take the Elgato out of the equation, I don't know if any of you guys have had trouble with DSR, but NVIDIA's DSR has just been super wonky for me. Now, the reason I use Elgato and DSR is because I like to use a separate computer to capture performance. That way you can see how games really play. All right. So with all that out of the way, here's what we're going to do in this video. All right. We will do the maximum settings, but we'll also kind of do the best settings for 1440p. And it should say in the title of the video that this is 1440p gameplay. So I'm sorry I didn't bring that up sooner. We've been recording for a little over a minute, and I should have brought that up sooner. All right, so there we go. 2560 by 1440 full screen. I do have VSync on, which actually we can turn off. Yeah, we'll go ahead and turn it off and hope for the best. VSync really seems to anger DSR when I play with it, but we'll turn it off. All right, so GPU max buffered frames is at 1, DirectX 11, MSAA is off for the moment. Alpha coverage is enhanced, SSAO is HBAO, and then for video quality, we're at optimal, which is the highest settings you can go to. You go over to custom over here where I made it the highest, and it's the same settings. All right, so here's what you get in 1440p with max settings minus MSAA with a 1060. We're at 92, 93, 94 frames per second. That is pretty special. 100 frames per second, but that's just because we're facing this way. I mean, that's pretty nice, am I right? If DSR wasn't being so weird, that and because we're using a capture device, it's either keep it uncapped like this and you'll get screen tearing, or cap it at 60, and it's a shame to cap it at 60, don't you think? Especially when it gets such a high frame rate. This is actually pretty impressive in my opinion. I never played the game with the GTX 980, but this seems to be better than I remember it being with my 970. I can tell you that. And it's way, way better than it would be with a 960. I seem to remember the game really struggling in 1440p actually with my 970. So we're just checking this out for a second. We're about to turn on the MSAA because that's really all we need to max the game out at this point. So let's do that. Go to the MSAA. Let's go straight to 8. So MSAA times 8. I would not recommend doing this despite the fact that that frame rate doesn't look too shabby. I would not recommend doing it. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you different levels of MSAA, and then I'm actually going to turn all that off and cap the frame rate and run around the island a little bit and talk to you about my experience with the GTX 1060 so far. But look, even if you have a G-Sync monitor, you could probably run this maxed out with MSAA times 8 and 1440p, and this isn't too bad. I mean, we're in the 30s and 40s. Chances are a lot of you would find yourself enjoying it. I really would not, I'm going to be honest with you. MSAA times 8 is a little heavy, makes things feel a little sluggish. So let's go to times 4, which is still way too much. Times 2 is actually decent. Times 2 is actually pretty legit. On a native 1440p monitor, MSAA times 2 is pretty good. So you see here we're in the 70s and 60s, but don't let this trick you. As you run around the island, see now we're in the 50s, even MSAA times 2 can go into the 50s, right? Once we try to go to an outpost and take it over and kill the bad guys and get in a firefight and animals run in, even MSAA times 2 goes into the 50s. So times 4 looks kind of appealing right here. Don't get me wrong. Matter of fact, let me stand still and let you soak the scenery in. Times 4 gives the impression that it would work. You know, you look at that frame rate up there in the upper right hand corner and it looks like, oh, you know, this isn't going to be too bad. But actual gameplay, playing the game for real, I think times four is kind of pushing it. Now, to each their own. It's computer gaming. You can do what you want. All right. Now, times 2, this is actually pretty legit. This is if you're not playing with NVIDIA's DSR and you're playing on a proper 144 hertz 1440p monitor, most of the time, here we'll get going. Most of the time you will be in the 60s. Actually, I said we're going to get going, but let me cap the frame rate here in a second and then we'll get going. Most of the time you'll be in the 60s to 70s. Sometimes you go into the 50s with MSAA times 2 on a proper 144 hertz 1440p monitor. Now the reason I say that is if you cap the frame rate on a 60 hertz monitor like what we're dealing with here, look, that's beautiful, right? That is a gorgeous image. That looks very, very nice. But here's the thing. If you have a 60 hertz monitor, it can dip pretty hard and pretty suddenly. Here, with the frame rate capped, MSAA times 2, we'll get moving. I would, if you have to play on a 60 hertz monitor, and maybe even if you played on a 144 hertz monitor, if you don't have G-Sync and you're using V-Sync, I would almost suggest not using MSAA because there can be some pretty hard frame rate dips and it can be unsettling, a little bit jarring, if you will. Here, let me show you some of the prettiness though. This is very pretty, very beautiful, nice water, nice beach and rocks and trees, a fishy. Here's a little goldfish. It's native to this island. This is something that you would want to get for your children. They sell that right there in a little plastic bag at circuses and fairs and stuff. That's not really a goldfish. Anyway, no, this is pretty tight. This is pretty legit. But as you can see, we'll get going and it will jump into the 40s and 50s even a little bit. Alright, so see those tires? Now, one thing I like about this game engine is if you do have MSAA on, little things like those tires really stand out. There's something about games from this era where some of the textures are not that great. I'll give you an example. Like these wooden crates, not a super great texture, alright? Not a great texture at all. Not very impressive. The boat overall, right? Not that great of a texture, not that great of a texture, but there's a couple things on this boat that actually look good, especially in 1440p and especially with MSAA. So two things that look really good on this boat would be that railing right there. See the little hand railing there? That hand railing actually looks better than the rest of the boat. And if you have a good monitor, you can notice the contrast. You'll notice the boat looks kind of blasé, and then the hand railing actually looks pretty dense and high resolution. And then the tires look pretty good. But then the rest of the boat, not so great. There's a lot of things from games from this era that look like that, where some things look good and some things don't. Like this forklift looks mostly kind of snazzy, mostly kind of okay. And then some of it, like that cage up there, not so much. Anyway, the game just stuttered a little bit, even though the frame rate didn't dip down. It still says 60 FPS up there in the upper right hand corner, but I felt it stutter. And there's a part of me that wonders if this game acts weird with i7s. Now, some of you may be familiar with a thing called core parking. There's this issue. So you have i7 processors, which we are using one. This is a 4790 Haswell processor. It's an i7. Oh, here, let's get out of here. Watch this. Watch this juxtaposition. Look how incredibly high resolution that gun looks. How incredibly detailed and shiny, and there's richness to it. And yet the boat that it's up against doesn't look anywhere near as nice. Like I said, games from 2011, 2012, 2013, they kind of have that weird juxtaposition. The games that are made these days, like in 2015, 2016, everything in the game looks great. But that was not the case during this time period. So, anyway, we're going to, we still have MSAA on ×2. We still have the game maxed out. Otherwise, we're still using VSync. We're going to go up here to this outpost and we're going to see if the frame rate goes into the 50s. Furthermore, we're also going to look, I'm going to show you a specific area where the frame rate always goes down. Now there's a lot of pop in no matter what you do. Like when you come up on this beach, there is a lot of grass pop in, and that's, you know, undesirable. Where are they? Oh, is it this? I thought it was people. No, it is people. There's people over there. Which one's the bad guy? Okay, the good guy won. Yeah, this game. So Far Cry 4, I feel like you can kind of shoot your homeboys a little bit and get away with it. In Far Cry 3, if you kill one of your allies, man, they take that stuff personally. Like, they get offended really fast. As Drake would say, they go from 0 to 100 real quick. They do not like that. Alright, so one thing I don't like about this game is you cannot turn off motion blur, to my knowledge. And MSAA seems to exacerbate the motion blur. Oh yeah, when we were coming over here, I was going to tell you, there's a spot. We're about to hit a spot where the frame rate always starts to have trouble. Oh, we're also going to talk about core parking. I didn't forget. But anyway, there's going to be a spot that kind of stutters a little bit. It's over this hill over here. We're pretty close to it. All right. Oh yeah, GTX 1060. We need to talk about that too. There's something about the 1060. Yeah, let me turn off MSAA for a minute. There's something about the 1060 and the 1070. I've not used the 1080 so far, but I've heard people with 1080s point this out. There's something about these Pascal cards that makes things look sharper. Now, in my opinion, I've noticed in some games, I feel like the geometry engine is different. And I think I even read somewhere that the geometry engine is different for Pascal. And in a way, I think I preferred Maxwell's geometry engine for how some things look. That's a whole nother story. But as far as lighting goes, and as far as like crispness goes, how crisp something looks, Pascal has been pretty awesome. Like, take this 1060 here. This is a Founders card. And the trees look very clear and very crisp against that sky. So I go for pop, right? You have plants, grass, tree, trunk, plus leaves, plus clouds, plus blue sky, plus sun. Everything, and even like this little branch right here, everything pops on the screen. Even a butterfly that just flew by. Even the smoke, that's smoke coming out of the outpost over here. Everything with the Pascal card seems to pop. And one of the cool things about that is when I play games on Pascal, sometimes I don't really feel like I need MSAA. Because the truth is, and let me turn it back on, the truth is MSAA, the reason I always used it was because it would make things shinier, right? Like, it would make things on the screen pop. And I've had people, for whatever reason, comment in my videos that MSAA doesn't make things shiny, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Go buy a different monitor, because it does. I've tried it on multiple monitors. There's this sheen that ends up on objects. SMAA could do it too. And then when you play the first Tomb Raider game, well, the Tomb Raider 2013, when I say first, that one, it's not SMAA, it's not MSAA, it's whatever their equivalent is in that, and that makes things shinier. That's a real thing that I've noticed. But anyway, with these Pascal cards, they make things so crisp and bright and pop anyway that a lot of times I don't really feel like I need MSAA, which frees up some headroom for your frame rate. Alright, the reason I stopped here is we're going to go across this road, and as we cross the road, and as we go over this hill, this little short hill I'm aimed at, normally when I play this game, it starts to stutter. See, there's all kinds of open world games. Yep, there it went to 57, and I felt it hitch. Sometimes it'll continue to hitch all the way till you get about here, and then it'll start to stop hitching. There's something about open world games that have weird moments on their maps. Probably has to do with loading. You're going from walking through the woods over there where there's not much going on to coming over a hill, loading a new area. Now there's an outpost. Now there's bad guys. There's all this stuff, all this extra geometry. There's all kinds of systems in place. You have alarms, you have barrels, you have an animal. So my assumption would be, as you come over this hill, I probably didn't go, no, I felt it stutter and it went down to 58. As you come over this hill, it's trying to load all that stuff. And I catch that stuff when I play open world games. there's repeatable spots on maps where you can make that happen over and over again. All right, so let me get sniper rifle and a submachine gun, MP5. Now what we're going to do is we're going to play around over here. We're going to kill the snipers, but we're not really going to take the outpost. We're going to kill the snipers because if you play around and leave the snipers, well, that's a bad idea. You can actually die. So, and there's 4 snipers here too. So interestingly enough, oh man, the one on the roof walked away. All right, whatever. Make it more interesting. So you got 2 here you can take out in one shot. You got 1 here. And then there's a 4th sniper who would be on the roof, but he walked down as part of his patrol. Where is the dude? Taking out that sniper will make it easier to play around because we're actually going to have him call in reinforcements and stuff. There he is. Alright, so now I let them see me. I let them call in reinforcements. Here, let's switch to the submachine gun. Get the FAMAS over here as my secondary, if you will. Alright, hey guys, look at me. Yes, I am invading. I'm a trespasser. You should call for reinforcements. Why don't you do that, buddy? Why don't you call your homies? There we go. I actually do not want to kill all these bad guys because if I were to have killed them all, usually get that dude by now. Anyway, if I kill them all, then I can't keep doing this over and over again. When I do my testing, I always come over to this area. Alright, so the stuttering and such. Here's what's really weird. When I play this game in full 1080p at about 100 to 120 frames per second, I get stuttering. If I play it at 1440p in the 60 to 80 frame per second range, I don't get stuttering. Now, when I play the game with a 980 Ti, which is like high frame rate all day, I get a little bit stuttering. There's something about this game and high frame rates that causes stuttering, and maybe it has to do with the i7, maybe it has to do with core parking. I'm not going to be able to describe to you exactly what core parking is, but people claim, all right, so you got an i7, it does hyper-threading, right? If you had an i5 that without hyper-threading, which I think there might be some SKUs of the i5 that hyper-thread, but don't quote me on that. But if you have an i5 with no hyper-threading whatsoever, it'll play games, you know, whatever, it'd be just fine. I just felt it hitch and it went down to 57 frames per second. But if you get an i7, it hyper-threads, and some games don't deal with that very well. So automatically the i7 hyper-threads, all right? Some games handle that just fine. It doesn't bother them whatsoever. They play just fine. Some games you need to do something about core parking, or you need to disable core parking even, I think. Here's the thing. I have followed forums advice and commenters advice, and I've done core parking before. And in the games that were giving me trouble, they didn't give me as much trouble anymore, but then new games would. Games that never gave me trouble before. So I actually, this is a 4790. I also have a 6700K. Notice how the 4790 is not a K SKU. But I do have a third processor, a 4690K, that I plan on using for testing this week. I'm actually going to build an HTP home theater PC. Yeah, HTPC with said 4690K. And we're going to play some of these same games like this one right here that stutters with that 4690K without hyperthreading, and we are going to see if it stutters less. Because when I had this game and when I turned the resolution to 1080p, man, even with the 1060, it was stuttering. It's about 100, 120 frames per second, and it just felt like crap. And it's these weird micro stutters too. I need to be careful so I don't kill everybody. All right, let's just go for a walk. All right, see how pretty this is? And I'm actually surprised the frame rate. Remember, we are at 1440p. We are using a GTX 1060, which in some ways is more powerful than a 980. In some ways it's not. It's definitely more powerful than a 970 from what people have been saying so far. I've used it for less than a week. I'm not prepared to tell you for sure where it stands. I'm still trying to figure all that out myself. And I usually try to be very, very thorough before I start making promises to you guys. Because usually if I say a card performs a certain way, that is exactly how it performs. And I'm not ready to give it that verdict yet. Like I said, I've had the card for less than a week. But this card can just throw the frames out at 1080p. Here, let's turn VSync off, right? I was expecting this to go into the 50s. I saw it go into the 50s earlier, and it did not. So let's just turn the VSync off. See? Now, again, if you have a proper 144 hertz monitor, then this is probably the frame rate you're going to get even with VSync. Because, in case you guys don't know, if you have a 144 hertz monitor and you use VSync, it's not going to cap you at 60 unless your NVIDIA control panel tells it to, or unless it's capped in the game. But I've played on a 144 hertz monitor, 1080p and 1440p, and with VSync on, you can be into the 100s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So, in case you're unaware, like if you think you buy a 144 hertz monitor and you turn on VSync, if you think it's going to cap at 60, no, it's not supposed to anyway. So yeah, this looks a little crappy right now. I'm not going to lie. I think that G-Sync and V-Sync make games look better. Some people disagree with that. I don't like the screen tearing, and I feel like it overall looks choppy. It doesn't feel too choppy, but it looks choppy. Now remember, this is 1440p with should be MSAA times 2 on. Let's look. MSAA times 2. Alpha coverage is enhanced. HBAO is on. VSync is off. 1440p full screen, and then video quality is set for optimal. So again, these are pretty good settings and resolution, and pretty good frame rate for 1440p. So I'm about to wrap this up. I do want to say again, I will be testing this with my i5 hopefully tomorrow, to be honest. Like, that's my goal, is to put the HTPC together tomorrow. That is what I'm hoping to do. And I will see if, when we're in 1080p and we're getting more than 100 frames per second, you see we're getting 70 frames per second right now in the 1440p. So when we're getting more than 100 frames per second, I'm telling you, this game was stuttering. My 980 Ti, it stutters. What I got to do when I play this at high frame rate, I have to toggle this stuff around. The max buffered frames, the VSync. I don't know what it is about this game. It's very wonky. I think somebody once told me in the comments that if you go to DX9 instead of DX11, which is what I have selected, it plays more stably and with less stuttering. I think somebody said that, but if you go to DX9, you're going to lose a lot of the graphical features. So I've never really done that. Hey, all you dudes. It's like a party bus. A veritable party bus, if you will. Let's see the frame rate went down to 60, 64. It's not going to be like super high frame rate at 1440p, but this is pretty awesome. So again, to finish that thought, what I will do is I will try it with an i5. It could be core parking at play, or the need to core park, or whatever. It could be hyper threading, I guess. It could be the culprit. That would have been a way shorter way to say this than the meandering way that I've been saying it. I apologize. I'm trying to talk to you and play a game at the same time. But, or it might still play like crap at the high frame rates even with the i5. We're going to find out. But for sure, when I've used this 4790 and my 6700K and I'm getting my super high frame rates, even with a 980 Ti, 980 Ti is like, you can max the game out and get crazy high frame rates at 1080p. And it always plays kind of funny. I made a video because I thought G-Sync would fix it. I used the Acer Predator 1440p monitor, and it had G-Sync, and the game still stuttered. Because remember, a 980 Ti is more powerful than this. Alright, so a 980 Ti in 1440p can actually get 100 frames per second pretty easily in this game. So it was stuttering even at 1440p, even with G-Sync, even on an Acer Predator. Whoa, that's actually pretty exciting. And now we're dead. It was exciting though. I was hoping I was going to land in such a way that like you guys could like see the beach, because it looked like we were coming up on some beach. Anyway, let me know in the comments how the game plays for you. There's my Far Cry 3 videos actually get a surprising amount of traffic. I do Far Cry 3 videos for every single graphics card, because for some people the game plays perfectly, and for other people they have the issues like I'm having. And again, maybe it's an i7 thing and hyper threading. I don't know. So I said all that. The way I play the game personally, I think, see, I want it to play 100% smoothly and without motion blur. So with this card, I actually kind of like it. Look at that. Look at that frame rate too, though. Wow. Turn off MSAA and it's in the 80s and 90s now. Although it's not that stuttery. Remember, it doesn't look that great because VSync is on. VSync is without the VSync, you have screen tearing and such. It's just not as solid looking of a picture. By the way, this game looks, yeah, that looks so much better. I don't know if you guys can tell or not. I can tell even in a YouTube video. And the screen went black. And the game crashed. How you like them apples? Alright. Maybe that's a sign. I told you, man, with DSR, it has been really weird trying to record this game. DSR in general, like Grand Theft Auto 5 has just been hating DSR. What's another game? The Division's done okay, surprisingly enough. But yeah, DSR has been wonky lately. Let me know how DSR works for you guys, actually. If any of you even use DSR. I'm wondering if maybe Pascal on DSR, maybe it's a driver issue that they're trying to work out. I don't know. Because I've used DSR for almost a year and it's never caused these problems. But ever since I've been testing the 1070 and 1060, I've been using DSR for 4K and 1440p, and I've been having these issues. Although I'll tell you what, I did Overwatch in 4K with DSR for over an hour, and it was flawless. No problem at all. So, alright, hopefully this video has been helpful for you guys. This has been AI Gaming 1776. Please share the video with your friends. Tell them that there's this dude over here that gets pretty thorough when it comes to GPU demonstrations. I've got 4 1070s right now, a 1060, 2 980 Ti's, one is water cooled. I got a water cooled 1070, by the way. 2 gigabyte 960, 4 gigabyte 960, 970. I've got some AMD cards, a 380. Is it 3? Yeah, 380, 390, and 390X. So I test a bunch of games, I test a bunch of hardware. I already told you I've got an unlocked 6700K, I got this locked 4790, I've got a 4690K. I even have an AMD system that, to be completely honest with you, I'm like a monkey with a football with that thing. I've been trying to get the overclock to be stable on the AMD system, and there's people on the internet saying they get their AMD chips up to like 5.0 gigahertz, and I'm at like 4.4. So I'm trying to up my AMD game yet. That's why I'm not really talking about that too much. I'm still behind the scenes working on that. But anyway, hopefully these videos are helpful for you guys. Please like and subscribe and tell your friends about them and all that jazz. And again, hopefully you've learned something or this has been helpful for you. And hopefully this is even still recording, because the last time DSR messed up, it stopped recording my audio halfway through the video. Alright, have yourselves an excellent night. This has been AI Gaming 1776. I love you very much, and peace out.